Welcome back with a smiling face. Links to previous episodes are given in the video description, so don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video. The Edge of Tomorrow. Episode 10. Chapter 81. A switch had flipped in Cade as I uttered those words, and his emotions barreled into me at full force. It was Alec's hands that kept me centered, and Cade's touch that calmed my mind. The bond wasn't complete yet, not without them marking me in return. Even with the halfway connection between us, I was feeling their lust and desire as though they were amplifications of my own. I was practically humming with energy that connected the three of us. I could feel it all around me, buzzing like a million electrified bees. I couldn't think of anything more fulfilling than this. The threat of what would come had vanished from my mind, unable to live another second when the twins were showering me with their attention. "This is overwhelming. This is how much we want you," Cade whispered in my ear. "You teased us today, doll," Alec murmured from behind me. "We might have picked that bikini for you, but you used it against us. And you would do it all again." Cade chuckled. Having S*X in the pool provided little in the way of lubrication. Cade enjoyed being dominant nearly as much as I enjoyed pleasing the two of them. It was effortless, giving in to Cade's demands like I was born to serve. Don't get me wrong, not a single person on this earth could ever boss me around, but the twins were different. They were the only ones I would bend for, the only ones I would yield to. Just as they would submit to me alone, I would return that favor. "Are you sure you can handle sharing us, doll?" Alec whispered with a feral grin. "She's more than ready for the both of us." Cade cooed in my ear. Alec tossed a small bottle of lube at Cade, who gave me a wicked grin when we locked eyes. I was excited to share the two of them, to feel them both at the same time. I wondered if I would ever feel anything better. I was sandwiched between the both. They took their time, going incredibly slow so that I might become situated to the two of them. Just when I thought I couldn't take any more, "I think I'm all right now." I was half awake when I felt a cold rag sleep. "Sweetheart. Let us take care of you," Cade murmured, looking up with dark eyes. "We can have more fun in the morning." Insatiable alphas, I muttered somewhat drunkenly before falling fast asleep. I was having a dream about the high table meeting. I sat around a huge table, suffering the dark glares from the middle-aged alphas in the other seats. They were debating on whether or not I should live. So far, the majority wanted me dead. The middle-aged, silver-haired alphas around me noticed nothing, consumed in their own debate over my life. I hissed in my dream, feeling the pressure gradually. "This isn't happening. Wake up, little doll." My eyes snapped open, and light flooded my vision. I could still hear those insufferable alphas in the background, debating whether or not I deserved to live, whether or not I was a threat. All lingering thoughts of my dream were demolished. "That's it, baby," he murmured, eyes flickering hungrily. "Lay back and let me make you feel good." "That's it, look over at Cade. Let him see that pretty face you make when you come." Sure enough, Cade sat just a few feet away. He was in a maroon armchair that sat beside the fireplace, though it was turned to face the bed I laid on. He wore a form-fitting tank top. "Good morning, sweetheart." He spoke. Good morning, Cade." I stammered, "Look at me." Cade snarled when I turned my eyes back to Alec, fisting my hands in his dark hair. I looked over at Cade just in time, and saw stars when he punishing me with long strokes. "Oh, Alec!" I gasped, my body going taut as I was dominated by my pleasure. "I think I've found my new favorite way to wake our mate up, brother. She does look stunning," Cade answered sincerely, though he still had a playful light in his eyes. As much as we'd love to stay in bed all day, and believe me, we would, Tori is downstairs demanding breakfast. Alec chuckled, she's very petulant for a regular pack member. Cade muttered to himself, making me snicker and bat at his arm. Promising myself a long day with my twins, I changed clothes and trudged downstairs. Cade had helped me brush the knots from my hair, and was actually incredibly gentle. I couldn't help but snicker when he picked up the tiny hairbrush with his large hands, and yelped when he whacked me. Looks like someone had a good morning. Tori commented as we walked down the stairs, a grin plastered to her face. I've always said, this day keeps the rage away. When have you ever said that? I countered, sticking my tongue out at her. Due to your previous lack of inexperience, I never said it to you. Tori retorted. Shortly after, the conversation gave way into silence. Alec and Cade shuffled at the stove, cracking eggs, searing bacon, and making deliciously fluffy pancakes. I was never one to care about the stereotypical ideal of what a man should be. Strong, murderous, silent, and brooding, certainly not incredible at cooking, kind, and amazingly thoughtful. The twins were the perfect mix of everything I needed to grow and blossom. These are incredible. I groaned, smothering the stack of pancakes in a dollop of thick fudge. When I open up a bakery someday, you two are going to be my first employees. That actually sounds like a lot of fun. Alec mused, flashing a cheeky grin at Cade. It was Tori who sat in silence, her emerald eyes darting between the three of us. As I flitted through her emotions, there wasn't any anger or jealousy present. There was a good bit of embarrassment, interest, and the tiniest hint of both arousal and disgust. The arousal and disgust were extremely minute, both battling one another for a foothold in her mind. Are you okay? I asked, sounding like a complete and total dumbass. Would you care to tell her, or shall I? Cade drawled slowly, crunching on a bit of bacon. I was now hyper-tuned into their emotions, trying to figure out what happened. Cade was relaxed, amused even as he sat there staring Tori down. Tori seemed undisturbed by the humor in Cade's eyes and gave him a pointed look. Fine, but it's not even a big deal. Tori snorted, one of the only people who actually had the balls to roll their eyes at Cade. She turned her face towards me and I noted the light blush staining her face. Last night I heard some noise, it woke me up. Sounded like an animal growling or some shit. Anyway, I peeked out the window and well, I saw you guys. Oh. Was all I managed to say, fighting to keep my jaw in place. My face erupted in a horrible blush before I finally reminded myself that what we did was completely natural. Even then, the last thing I wanted was for my friend to get a glimpse of what went down last night. It's not a big deal. She repeated, shaking her head at me. I only looked out for like 3 seconds. 15. Cade countered, making Tori snarl in his direction. Whatever. She shrugged, shoving a forkful of pancakes into her mouth. My bedroom window literally faced the pool. If you weren't out there snarling and growling for hours, I would have never woken up. Regardless, I gotta say, I'm kind of impressed. Thank you. Alec chimed in, a warm grin on his face. I don't want to know how much you saw. I muttered, forcing myself to make eye contact with my closest friend. We should have taken better care not to wake you, so I apologize for that. She's so very precious when she's frazzled. Cade smirked, taking a long drink of steaming coffee. Don't be embarrassed, Claire. Tori snorted, you're not the first person I've seen going at it, but you were definitely the most interesting. All right, enough. I hissed, placing a hand to my heated forehead. It's bad enough you saw us, I don't need a running commentary on what went down. Fine, fine. She sighed, waving her hand at me. When we're alone, I want details. Details? Yes, ma'am. I huffed, side-eyeing her. You know, sometimes I think you'd be better suited as Luna. Maybe I was Luna in a past life. She replied, waving her fork. But a better Luna than you? Nah, you're already a good Luna, even if you're still in training. Much appreciated. I smiled slowly, incredibly thankful for the subject change. Tori left shortly after breakfast, heading home to finish packing her belongings. We would all be staying in the city, ordering countless suites at a very specific hotel. We had no choice but to stay at a hotel owned by the High Table, which made Alec and Cade more hellbent on having me protected. Once Tori left, we picked up where we left off this morning. Once I was sweaty and completely sated, I asked the twins about when they would mark me. Their own marks were healing at an incredible rate, and I was a bit excited to see the finished product of my own mark. It seemed both of theirs were different, my mark was not the same on both twins. We will mark you tonight, doll. Alex smiled softly, leading me to the steaming shower that awaited. It's often harder for the Lunas when getting marked. Taking in a part of an alpha, it can be a bit disorienting. Plus, I'll be getting 2 marks. I nodded, stepping under the hot stream and letting out a groan. Do you think I'll pass out? There's a chance you might. Cade shrugged, stepping into the shower along with Alec and I. If you do, you will be well taken care of until you wake. With how I woke up this morning, I'm sure you'll both take great care of me. I smirked, shifting as that comforting soreness sounded from between my legs. Just as we were preparing to get out of the shower, a heavy knocking sound filled the house. With my human ears, I wouldn't have heard a thing. With my werewolf hearing, I managed to pinpoint the hard knock against thick wood. It parted through the sound of running water like smashing a hammer to nail. Were you expecting someone? I asked, curiously. Not at all. Alec frowned, his eyes darting over to Cade. No one lives around us for at least 10 miles. The 3 of us hurried out of the shower and into the bedroom. I slipped on a comfortable t-shirt and a pair of leggings before shoving some fuzzy socks on my feet. I padded down the stairs behind the twins, trying to peer over their shoulders as they opened the front door. I managed to squeeze in between them at the last moment, and met a pair of startlingly blue eyes. Miss Claire, just the she-wolf I've been looking for. The man nodded. His eyes were a bright shade of blue, much lighter than my one. His eyes were narrow and hard. The color and shape reminded me of shards of glass, ready to pierce and cut the skin. His hair was a light shade of gold, more wheat-colored than anything. His build was muscular without being too large, or too lanky. He was dressed impeccably, nothing like what you would see at a cabin in the forest. His suit jacket was a deep shade of blue, nearly black under the sun. He wore a buttoned-up shirt beneath, and a pair of dark slacks. His hair was slicked to the side, his face shaved and smooth. Until he opened his mouth to speak, I had thought he was some kind of businessman. Future Alpha of the Lunar Pack, son of Alpha Marcus Novak. Heir to the first seat on the High Table, he spoke in smooth English, each syllable pronounced with sharp accuracy. This man knew how to wield his words like weapons, sharpened and dripping with blood. My jaw went a little lack when Cade interrupted him, stepping forward with his towering form. The twins were built like absolute beasts, towering over the man with their hulking forms. Don't get me wrong, the other man looked like he could handle himself in a fight, but I was little more than biased. Zayn Novak. Kate interrupted with that gravely, booming voice of his. Zayn's eyes narrowed, and I felt my own protectiveness bubble in my gut like acid. He was clearly annoyed. I knew both from the twitching of his lips, and from the battery acid emotions radiating from his body. Might I step inside? He asked, though there was no question in his tone. He was coming in whether we liked it or not. Both the twins stiffened at the obvious challenge in his tone. I have traveled a very long way to speak with Miss Claire, and I would hate to leave without what I came for. Chapter 82. Feeling Cade's arctic rage and seeing his muscles bunch and tense, I leapt into action. Alec was much better at concealing his murderous appetite, fixing a disinterested look on his face. I pushed myself between the twins, stepping towards the open front door. Zayn's eyes tracked my movements like he expected me to bolt. I suppressed the look of irritation that threatened to form on my face and gave him a disinterested look of my own. Men like Zayn, they clearly had an inflated sense of self-worth, much like Garrett. Come in, but make it quick. I replied haughtily, my arms crossed over my chest. I'm sure I wasn't the most intimidating she-wolf, standing at least 1.5 feet beneath Zayn. On the bright side, what I lacked in appearance, I made up for in power. Zayn's face was hard, schooled in what I was sure was his threatening look. His emotions told the truth, and he couldn't even begin to hide them from me. He wasn't afraid, no, he was too arrogant for that. He was annoyed at the fact that he was here, irritated that the twins had stood up to him, and suspicious over my lack of concern. I turned on my heel and walked through the living room, calling out to Zayn. I was done treating this world as though it were shiny and new. I wouldn't let these dominant males stomp me into the perfect submissive she-wolf. I dealt with Melissa and Frank of all people. If they taught me anything, it was not to take shit from people. Thalia stirred within me happily, reminding me that I was a Luna, not some weak girl. You can also drop the tough guy act. I shot a smirk in his direction. My mates aren't fazed by it, and I'm sure as not either. I strolled into the kitchen and picked at some of the leftover breakfast the twins had made. Alec, Cade, and Zayn entered the kitchen just a few seconds later. The twins seemed content on acting bodyguard, standing in the most intimidating way possible on either side of my body. Zayn's eyes darted around the cabin, as if he had never stepped into a place quite like this. It wasn't anything strange, just a cabin fitted in more luxury than I was used to. Perhaps Zayn was used to even more luxury than what this cabin had to offer. Zayn tilted his head, those bright eyes darting between the twins before settling on me. A flash of interest burned and fizzled so quickly within him that I nearly missed it. His angular nose wrinkled a bit, and his lips formed a thin line. Did you burn something, Claire? Somehow, I'm not surprised you assumed I cooked. I snorted, refusing to let this man bait me. The twins seemed to be in agreement, though I wasn't sure how that much rage could fit inside Cade's form though. I do suppose that's why his build is so large. Also, have you even cooked a day in your life? Why would I need to cook? Zayn replied with a cool voice, one of his perfect eyebrows lifting at me. The way he talked to me reminded me of Garrett, like I was a child dancing through the world of adults, trying to make sense of things I knew nothing about. I am a future alpha. Others have the job to cook for me, so that I might spend my time on more important things. I see. So, one of those more important things was hunting me down, for what? I pressed, grabbing a piece of bacon and wrapping it in a pancake before chomping down. I'd think a big, strong alpha has better things to do. Zayn's irritation tasted like bitter apples and salt, but it gave me some insight I wouldn't have had otherwise. He didn't want to be here. Searching for some white wolf was beneath his status. Someone had forced him to be here, most likely his father. I get it now. You don't want to be here. I nodded, letting a surefire smile twitch onto my face. Let me guess, you pissed Dad off and he sent you here, on an errand meant for foot soldiers. Enough of that. Zayn replied smoothly, his azure eyes darkening into a shade of navy. He knew what he was looking for, and I could almost feel his eyes hone into the smooth skin on my neck. You are unmarked, and have not been sworn into your pack as Luna. Observant, but I will be marked tonight. I countered, as you can see, my mates already have my mark. They do, but that does not change the uncompleted ceremony. Zayn pointed out, you are not officially Luna of any pack. As your father and uncle have not yet relinquished their rights to their own packs, you are essentially just a she-wolf with an attitude problem. You will not be permitted to speak during the high table meeting, not without a title or purpose. You are Luna, Claire. As your mates, we will not disrespect you by throwing this shithead out of the house. You'll have so many alphas challenging you, trying to knock you down a peg. It's not our job to step in on your behalf, no matter how much we want to. Unfortunately, we have about 10 minutes before Cade goes feral on him. Alec's soothing voice ran through my mind, sharp with the edge of rage. Alec was right, both about me and Cade. Cade looked downright murderous, his fists clenched and jaw set tightly. His anger nearly dragged me in, like whips of ice that wrapped around my ankles and wrists. I won't be permitted to speak? On a meeting that has to do with my life. I chuckled dryly, feeling the pressure of those angry and bitter emotions swirling around me. My fingers twitched and I could nearly grab them, I could nearly fling them at Zayn as I had during the battle. A ceremony means nothing. If you think I was born anything other than a Luna, you are sorely mistaken. Your disregard for our customs only shows me how in over your head you are. Zayn replied, looking down on me like I was a child in need of scolding. Only alphas and their Lunas are permitted to speak at meetings, unless they are a guest called forth. I'm not disregarding any customs. This meeting has to do with my right to live, as if something like that is really up for debate. I snapped, unable to keep Cade's anger at bay. It whipped through me like an ice storm, frosting over my insides until they ached. Cade's anger was endless, a pure emotion based on loyalty and love. It acted like a nuclear bomb within me, filling me with so much energy that I was sure I might burst. I will speak at this meeting, and I will not request permission from a bunch of old-fashioned alphas. You've gotten what you came for. Now, get out before my mates toss you on your pampas. That anger pulsed within me, and lashed out at the nearest thing. Icy tendrils of mine and Cade's rage shot out towards Zayn, and I watched in silence as they leapt for his face. Those tendrils bounced against something clear and smooth, a bubble wrapped around Zayn, just a few inches from his skin. That bubble acted like a force field, making those tendrils of cold rage shatter. It shimmered once more before becoming translucent again, but I couldn't mistake what I had seen. There was only one explanation, and it only troubled me further. You have a white wolf protecting you. I stated, sure that I was correct. How come I can still feel your emotions? Why doesn't your little force field protect you from that? There are many variants of white wolf abilities, this is one of them. Zayn shrugged, it protects from magical attacks, nothing more. So, if I shatter your nose, it will not protect you. Cade mused, his eyes locked on the azure eyes and golden hair of his prey. Zayn ignored Cade but did give him a scathing look. So as long as their powers can be used by your pack, they have the right to live. I scoffed, finally getting a grasp at what these high-table men were like. It wasn't about whether or not I deserved to live, but whether I could be controlled and used by them. Couldn't let this incredible weapon get into the hands of their enemies, as if I weren't a living person. I came here to observe, and give you a piece of advice. Zayn snapped, this time visibly irritated at what I had said. He didn't deny it, just as I knew he wouldn't. A pompous he might be, but he hadn't lied to me thus far. I am trying to convince my father that you can be useful, that you aren't an uncontrollable she-wolf with the power to level our pack in the high table. If you act like one, I cannot help you. If your help turns me into something to be used, something to be guarded and feared, I don't want it. I retorted, did you or any of the other high table members ever think that white wolves were created for a reason, and that reason was not to be controlled by those who fear us? Zayn remained quiet for a few long moments, his eyes locked on my every move. When he finally spoke, I was even more confused. You're going to change things, Claire. Try not to die along the way. He grunted, the one unrefined expression I actually saw from his face. He stalked through the kitchen and towards the front door, the three of us tailing him the entire way. Zayn flung the door open and stepped outside, but seemed to hesitate for a moment. I know you haven't been able to find much on your abilities, Zayn commented, not sparing a glance at the twins. Tell your people to search for soul eaters, and pray to the goddess you are not one of them. As soon as Zayn left and the sound of tires peeling down the pavement sounded, Alec was on the phone with Julian and Garrett. Soul eater. That sounded even more comforting than an emotional leech. I wasn't sure what to make of Zayn Novak. He was self-assured, pompous, and clearly felt some sort of animosity towards his father. The little tip he gave us about soul eaters wasn't exactly for our benefit. What would happen if I was a soul eater? I'm sure the chances of a bright future would dim under that revelation. Do you know Zayn or something? You seemed like you were about to explode the entire time. I asked, stepping into his arms and smiling when his anger ebbed. Zayn Novak is a spineless, insufferable prick who's had a silver spoon in his mouth the day he was born. Cade grunted, and I noticed he absent-mindedly brushed his hand against one of the thicker scars on his bicep. His father, Marcus, is even worse. At least Zayn pretends about his pack, Marcus doesn't bother with such formalities. And the fact that he came here I began, but was cut off when Cade ran his thumb along my lower lip. His eyebrows were creased, but I felt only the smallest drop of worry coming from him. It isn't a good sign. Cade replied, you were right about what you said earlier. Marcus sent Zayn here, though I'm not sure why. He usually likes to keep his property at his side, especially his prodigal son. Zayn must have done something to really piss him off, or maybe he couldn't trust anyone else with this. Julian and Garrett are pulling some of their sources, but it's going to be a bit difficult. Alec frowned, setting his phone down on the coffee table. We need the information, but they can't stir the water too much. The last thing we need is to tell the world we have a white wolf with rare and very dangerous abilities. This whole soul eater thing, it can't be true, right? I'm not the nicest person ever, but to eat someone's soul? I couldn't do that. I shook my head, trying to convince myself, but countless possibilities ran through my mind. I did say I would be willing to do anything to keep Alec and Cade safe, but did that include stealing someone's soul? The twins were quiet for a moment, as though they could sense my own internal debate. Once their mark sat on my skin, they'd be able to sense how truly tormented I was by this. The twins shared a look that had me curious, and Alec turned to me with a gentle smile on his face. Power isn't something to be afraid of, it's something to respect and use when needed. That's the thing someone like Marcus Novak doesn't understand. He sees power and wants it, all of it. He doesn't respect it, and uses it to hurt others. Alex sighed, cupping my face with a calloused hand. No matter how far your abilities progress, you should learn how to use them in their fullest. Cade chimed in, standing on the opposite side of me. You don't have to lord your power over others, but instead use it to protect your family and pack. Chapter 83. I completely forbade myself from thinking about Zayn Novak until tomorrow, just as we planned to leave for the high table meeting. I'd spend the rest of today and tonight with my twins, refusing to give Zayn another second of my time. Garrett and Julian were now set on the task of contacting their sources regarding what a soul eater might be, and how it connects to my abilities. We could only hope the information about what I was did not spread, as their sources might not be willing to give information if they believed a neighboring pack had a weapon primed and ready. I don't know about you two, but I'm not letting this ruin my day. Alex smirked as we trekked through the woods. From what I could tell, we were in the middle of absolute nowhere. We left out the back door and walked through the thickest part of the forest, leaving behind the sparkling lake and its tantalizing waters. The hike wasn't that bad, if I were being honest. My stamina and endurance were much better as a werewolf. I wasn't even winded, and managed to keep up with the twins easily. They definitely helped pave the way, holding back branches and pointing out stray roots. My eyes were everywhere, and Thalia was practically sitting front row, begging me to shift and leap into the overgrown brush. Why would the threat of me being a soul eater ruin your day? I teased a bit dryly. Alec, who was leading our three-man group further into the forest, turned and moved an eyebrow at me. His rough voice was accompanied by birds singing, and the earth beneath our feet crunching. It wouldn't, because I know that you can handle it. He said simply, giving me a smile that turned my insides to mush. Very few people are actually suited for power like that, you just happen to be one of them. Confident, but how can you know? I replied, huffing quietly when Cade stopped me from tripping over a thick root that was strung across our path. Let me think for a minute. Alec mused, and I found myself growing antsy with each quiet second that passed. Well, if you were a soul eater or whatever, would you have used your ability on Grace? I mean, after what she did to you, it makes sense. I didn't have to think on what Alec was saying and snorted at him. I briefly locked eyes with Cade when he tugged me in front of him whilst holding a branch back. I could see the lingering anger in his eyes, just as I felt it settle over me. Of course, I wouldn't. I scoffed, rolling my eyes at the two of them. They were being dramatic. She's a disgusting excuse for a human being, but she doesn't deserve her soul ripped out. People like that usually go to jail. That doesn't make me special, a lot of other people would do the same in my shoes. Not as many people as you're thinking. Alec denied, glancing at me from over his shoulder. I wouldn't. I'd devour her soul and not lose a night's sleep. We approached a small ravine in the forest, dotted with large stones that acted as our only way across. Alec's movements were smooth and graceful, even though the stones were coated in algae. I gritted my teeth and stepped on the top of one tentatively. My sandals had no grip, and I nearly slid forward right then and there. I second that. Cade grunted as he hoisted me in his arms, holding me against his chest while he stepped over the tops of the stones. His eyes were dark when they met mine, and a sinful smirk was on his face. Your reflexes are much better, but you're still quite clumsy for a werewolf. I'm not clumsy. I snapped playfully, scowling up at him. You and Alec are just special. You think we're special? Cade asked, chuckling low in my ear. We had crossed the small ravine already, but Cade had yet to set me down. "Sweetheart, you are the special one." Cade shifted and moved until my legs were wrapped around his torso, and my arms were around his neck. "How can you walk like this?" I scoffed, yelping when his hand slapped against my bottom. "It isn't very hard, I have motivation." He laughed, a sound that was as thick and rich as the forest around us. I stifled an embarrassing moan when he pulled me tightly against him, his rippling muscles beneath my thighs. "I'm not going to last another half hour if all I smell is her arousal." Alec called out from behind him, making Cade chuckle and I blanch. "Let me down!" I hissed quietly, tapping on Cade's shoulders. "If you don't, I won't last half an hour either. Actually, in that case, feel free to play with her a little while longer, brother." Alec chuckled, flashing a dark look my way. "Don't you dare!" I warned Cade, giving him a stern look. There was no way I'd be doing anything out here, not until I was able to cool off. It was unbearably humid, and the sweat trickled down my back in thin rivulets. Cade let me down slowly, and I could feel the full length of him pressing against the seam of his pants. His apologetic smile was flimsy, and I could see past it in an instant. Once the fire burning in my gut stopped raging out of control, the rest of the walk was actually pleasant. A cool breeze continued to whoosh by as we neared closer to our destination, giving me a small reprieve from the heat. I could hear the water running before actually seeing it, and could smell its freshness from far away. We broke through the tree line, and stood at the top of a small waterfall. Easily 10 feet high, I could feel the spray of the water as it clashed to the bottom. Jagged stones, shining with moisture, dotted the cliff and surrounding area. "You're sure no one will see us here?" I asked the two of them, feeling oddly exposed since my conversation with Zayn. "Nah, we own the surrounding forest." Alec reassured me, tossing his bag against the trunk of an oak tree. I trusted his word and took a deep breath. I was comfortable around the twins, but I was nearly positive that pang of nervousness in my gut would never go away. Their presences were just so consuming, and I wasn't sure I'd ever learn how not to drown in their eyes. I dropped my own bag to the ground, and stripped my t-shirt from my head. Alec stopped digging through his bag, his head moved and eyes on me. Cade acted the same, his attention diverted and placed on me. How couldn't I feel confident? I could feel what they felt for me. I sat at the center of their world, and there would never be another woman who could dare get that close. My shorts fell to the ground next. It had been a pair the twins packed me, one that took 15 minutes of debating to finally place on my body. It was completely see-through, revealing every inch of my body. Either way, that wasn't too different from what I had in mind. I sauntered up to Cade with as much confidence as I could muster. Once I stood a few inches away, I turned around and gazed up at him through my lashes. "Could you undo my bra, please?" I asked sweetly, my legs buckling when I felt a rush of need blast through my senses. Ever since marking the twins, their emotions were on overdrive. It was like I could feel them completely now, the emotion at its fullest. "Sure thing, sweetheart." He spoke after a few moments of silence, his voice was huskier than usual. I could feel every place his fingers touched my skin. He chuckled at the goosebumps that ran down my arms and back. "Need help with anything else?" Cade asked from behind me, his fingers toying with the lace underwear I wore. "I don't think so," I said breathlessly, taking a few steps away and dropping my underwear on top of the pile of clothes. If Cade were to have helped me with my underwear, he'd see the full extent of his impact on my body. That wasn't happening. There was only so much I could take, and I knew I wouldn't ever live it down. Are you two going to swim, or just stand here and stare at me? I asked, placing my hands on my hips as I looked them both in the eye. I didn't know I had the confidence to stand there in front of them. Even though my fingers twitched with the urge to cover myself, I managed to stand my ground. Well, we were going to swim. Alec reasoned with a sly smile and a shrug. I think we have something better in mind. Oh no, that's not happening. I shook my head, taking a few steps back towards the edge of the small cliff. We came here to swim, and I'm going to swim. You really can't be persuaded, doll? Alec asked, jutting his lower lip out in a pout that made my mouth water. Not a chance. I squealed, leaping from the top of the cliff and into the water below. The sweat was washed from my body, and the heat had vanished under the weight of cool water. The twins followed after me shortly, making identical splashes in the water below. I hid behind the waterfall, but was startled by Cade before I had the chance to sneak up on either of them. We swam for what felt like hours, not even stopping to eat. The sun cooked the ground below, but the water from the lake continued washing away the sweat. My limbs ached from the constant swimming and occasional wrestling matches, but I savored every bit of it. Alec and Cade were evenly matched when it came to wrestling. My new favorite source of entertainment came from watching the twins wrestle. Not only was there a plethora of rippling muscles to gaze at, they were actually quite funny. Cade would slam Alec into the water, splashing me as I perched myself on a smooth stone. Alec would somehow manage to hold onto Cade, sending him tumbling into the water. There wasn't a clear winner at the end of their battle, but both were heaving and throwing sideways glares at the other. Much to Thalia's delight, we shifted and raced throughout the forest. Alec had won every time, but I had managed to beat Cade 3 times. He snarled in outrage. Alec laughed in his face and called him a sore loser, making me snort and slowly erupt in laughter. Shortly after that, the 3 of us were sprawled on a thick blanket that Alec had tossed in the grass. The twins took turns devouring me like a personal feast. By the time they had finished, I was sore to the touch and dying for another dip in the cold water. We ventured home just as the sun began to set. The 3 of us made the hike back to the cabin, only to end up in bed an hour later. We couldn't keep our hands off of one another during our lengthy shower. Perhaps it was the threat of what might come tomorrow. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't help but think of the worst. They could sentence me to death, and deem me unworthy of life. Alec and Cade would send their packs to war for me, just as Julian and Garrett would. It would be a bloodbath, and for what? It's not for nothing. White wolves have been hunted and kept as weapons, it needs to end. We're strong enough to fight against this. Thalia reminded me, the voice of strength and duty that lived within my mind. The thought of what would come made the 3 of us on edge, desperate to claim and be claimed. I knew what would be coming tonight, and let their kisses chase away any lingering nerves. Will it hurt? I gasped, wedged between the twins with both sheathed inside of me completely. Cade stood at my front, Alec was behind. Don't worry about that, doll, Alec murmured in my ear, but the sound turned into a deep groan when he closed those last inches and filled me completely. Claire, they both took what they needed from me, and gave me twice in return. The twins quickly formed a rhythm. His body was shining with sweat, his husky scent filling every corner of the room. Come for us, sweetheart, Cade murmured. Cade took the left side and Alec had taken the right. The second their teeth broke through my skin, a flash of pain danced behind my eyes, only to be fought and smothered by the pleasure my body felt. That pain lived for a brief moment, but then expanded into something I had felt before. When I had marked the twins, I could feel that part of our connection form and grow. We weren't completed, not until I had that same mark. I could feel the moment their teeth had hit their mark, my neck was warm, incredibly warm despite the stinging pain. The twins lapped away the blood that dotted my neck. Cade rested his forehead against my own, remaining sheathed inside of me. I could feel his heavy heartbeats against my chest, and Alex at my back. "You are incredible, sweetheart." Cade's voice was an echo in my mind, "You did so well." His voice blended into my own thoughts so well I had nearly overlooked the comment. Can he hear me? I thought, is he in my mind, or am I in his? Think of it like we're constantly on a three-way call. Alec chuckled, joining the conversation. Is there any way to mute our little three-way call? I giggled, trying not to blush. There were too many things I didn't need the twins overhearing, mostly how much I drool over them. Their egos are big enough without me adding to the mix. Yes, doll. I do think we'll need to teach her how to block some of her thoughts. Alex snorted, directing his comment at Cade. Big egos, was Cade's grumbled response. Don't be such a baby. I cooed at Cade, whose eyes darkened in retaliation. I can think of a much better use for that mouth than saying those hateful things, sweetheart. Cade scolded me, giving me a kiss that stole my breath and made my core clench. His dark eyes flitted to his brother. I'd like to make our little mate scream now, brother. I'll never pass up an opportunity like that. Alec chuckled. His lips trailed my neck, and sent little shivers of pain down my neck whenever he hit my wound. We took advantage of our time together, tangled in a mess of limbs and whispered words. My body ached and thrummed, exhausted yet completely insatiable. My throat had grown a bit sore from the sounds I had made, the sounds the twins devoured. Only when the clock read early in the morning, did we curl up on the bed. I stayed up for a while after that, my head on Cade's chest and my legs tangled with Alex. I listened to the thrum of their hearts and the peaceful whispers of their emotions until my eyes finally fluttered shut. Chapter 84. Our relaxing weekend came to an abrupt halt just a few hours later. We were up at the crack of dawn, preparing for the trip. The twins had planned ahead, and already had a suitcase packed for each of us. Alec had this uncanny ability to pop right out of bed and head for the shower. Cade trudged down to the kitchen on my heels, following the scent of caffeine. 2 cups later, I no longer felt so cold and bleary. I left Cade in the kitchen to finish his own, and joined Alec in the shower. You nervous, doll? Alec asked me, kneading the shampoo into my scalp while I leaned helplessly against him. Just a bit. I replied, sighing when he stopped to let me rinse. My throat clenched momentarily, the words heavy. I don't want anyone dying for me. Alec knew what I was talking about. They had also thought of the worst possible outcomes and what they might mean for us. War was a very strong possibility. I think it's more than that now. It's not only about keeping you safe. We could actually change things now. Alec replied softly, massaging some conditioner into the ends of my hair. White wolves have been hunted and possibly enslaved for hundreds of years. There's never been a pack big enough to make a difference against the High Table. If war were to come, the deaths would not sit on your shoulders. Alec was right, but that didn't change the lives that would be snuffed out. I had gone from worrying about my next meal to the threat of oncoming war. You're right, things do need to change. I nodded, thinking of the white wolves that were kept alive. I had more questions than answers, but knew that a life in slavery is not a life at all. No matter how they were being treated, they deserved control over their lives. We'll do everything we can to avoid war though, right? Of course we will. Alex snorted, swatting my fingers away as I started scratching the healing mark on my neck. The 2 marks already had a thin film of skin on them, and a dark pattern beneath its surface. They were sensitive to the touch, mostly the twins' touches, and were horribly itchy. Alec held my fingers in his grip and shook his head. "Don't scratch them, doll." An hour later we were out the door, nestled in the sedan that had brought us to the cabin. I grumbled a bit over my plain breakfast. A few protein bars and an apple. 2 days of the twins' extravagant breakfasts had me hooked. They were making me spoiled and I didn't have the care to stop it. "What's the plan again?" I asked for what was possibly the 7th time. I wanted to memorize every step, every delay from here to there. Maybe I wanted some semblance of control, especially now that my rights were quite literally in the process of being taken away. "You're worrying." Alec frowned, locking eyes with Cade through the rear-view mirror. Before I had time to respond, Alec was unhooking my seatbelt and pulling me into the back. I landed on his lap with a squeal and blushed as his member stirred beneath me. Now that we were all marked, the twins could feel my emotions. The marks weren't healed yet, but the connection seemed strong enough. The 2 of them had been incredibly attentive this morning, influenced by the pull of my emotions. If I were feeling frustrated or angry, one of the twins seemed to materialize beside me. That hadn't changed in the few hours we'd been driving. It was nice, having someone feel my emotions for a change. Alec wrapped his arms around my torso and held me close while Cade recounted the plan with seemingly limitless patience. "We're taking this car to the outskirts of Garrett's pack. Once we hit neutral territory, we'll meet up with Tori and the security detail. Our parents, Julian and Garrett, will be traveling with another security party an hour or 2 back." Cade spoke, his eyes glued to the road. His next words were what I was really worried about. "It is not ideal, but we'll be staying at a hotel in neutral territory. After a few hours rest, we'll be on the road again." Neutral territory was land that belonged to the humans, or better, fighting grounds for werewolves' wars. No alpha wanted to damage their own land in the middle of war, so why not use unoccupied land? Unoccupied as in there were no werewolves living there, only humans. Neutral territory can be incredibly dangerous. We have no choice but to rest there tonight. We'll keep it short and safe. We've purchased an entire floor of the hotel, and there will be guards posted at every stairwell and elevator. Alec continued from what his brother had been saying. There are rogues and the occasional bounty hunter that reside within neutral territory. Why would werewolves need bounty hunters? I asked Alec, settling into the heat of his arms. Nothing could touch me when I was being held by one of my twins. The anxiety I had been feeling was washed away by all that was Alec. Not all werewolves like following the high table. Sometimes important werewolves escape by moving into neutral territory. They can live undetected as a rogue. Alec murmured, becoming distracted as he traced the edges of my lips with his thumb. What I was going to say next fizzled in my mind when Alec brought his lips down on my own. The rough pads of his fingers pressed into my face as he held my jaw, leaving me defenseless as he grasped my lower lip in between his teeth. "It's so easy to work you up, doll." Alec mumbled against my lips, pulling away from me with a laugh. The scent of my arousal had filled the sedan, light like dew-soaked petals. I swallowed thickly and pulled myself together. Locking eyes with Cade through the rearview mirror, I grinned sheepishly. "Sorry, Cade." Cade looked back at Alec and nodded. "You have 3 hours, then you're driving. Deal?" Alec grinned, making me roll my eyes. "Not happening, not for either of you." I snorted, sliding off Alec's lap and into the set beside him. 10 minutes into my self-imposed bet, my willpower snapped and crumbled. I would have thought having S*X in a car would be more awkward, more clumsy than normal. There was something arousing about teasing Cade, watching his knuckle turn white on the steering wheel, and the material of his pants strain. 3 hours later, we stopped at a gas station so the twins could switch places. Cade practically tackled me, laying me back on the seats of the sedan. The heavily tinted windows provided all of the privacy we needed, though Alec had a front row seat to the show. Well, that's one way to take my mind off of things, I commented with a huff. Morning quickly turned into afternoon. The soreness in my legs and backside were a testament to how long we had been driving. The twins seemed to have an endless bladder, and groaned when I needed to pee after an hour and a half. Not all of us can just pull it out of our pants. I snapped half-heartedly at the two of them. I knew the moment we entered onto neutral territory, because the twins had grown utterly silent. It was almost dark now, and each shadow on the shoulder of the road spooked me. I saw assassins in the dark, peons of the high table sent to rob me of my life. Alec called the head of our security team and remained on the phone with him until we arrived at the meet-up point. We all met in the parking lot of a closed-down truck stop. Across the street was the new and improved version. Cars filled the regular lots, and semi-trucks filled the remaining spaces. The abandoned truck stop we parked at, there was no one in sight. Within an hour, there were 5 other blacked-out sedans in the parking lot. We all sat near one another, and I nearly jumped from the vehicle when I saw a flash of red curls. Tori was getting out of one of the sedans. A security guard held the door as she emerged. "She's riding with us." Alex smiled through the rear view. "Figured you could use the extra support." "I appreciate that," I said sincerely, thankful for Tori's fearless presence. "Can you believe how creepy this place is?" Tori scoffed, climbing into the back seat of the sedan. Cade took a seat in the passenger, while Alec pulled out of the unused parking lot. We sandwiched ourselves in between 2 other sedans. I couldn't help but feel like the president, or some kind of royalty. We had our own protection detail tailing us on the road, standing at the doors to our bedrooms and watching out for threats. It was 1 in the morning now, and we had been traveling with the security team around us for 2 hours. My eyelids felt as though they were attached to weights. I couldn't understand why I was so tired when I had spent the day sitting down. Sitting in a car all day really drained your energy. Alec woke me from my nap as we pulled into the parking lot of the hotel. It was much more extravagant than what I was used to. I had stayed in motels with Melissa a few times, and didn't particularly care to drum up the memories. This hotel had a restaurant and a club inside, both on the bottom level. Valet drivers crowded the street outside. The soulful singing of a performer sounded from in the busy club. Cade booked the entire top floor for us and our security team. The team would take turns standing at the entrances and exits. I couldn't help but wonder if I actually needed this kind of protection. I certainly hoped I wasn't in any imminent danger. I fell face first into one of the plushest beds ever made, and was nearly asleep right then and there. Alec had to lift me from the bed to get me to move, and I might have fought him on that for a few seconds. Tori was staying in the room directly across from us. She was the only one who had an entire room to herself. Even Julian and Garrett had to share, a feat I still think is impossible for the 2 of them. I curled up between Alec and Cade, falling asleep as Cade's fingers traced patterns up my spine and Alec's cheek fell against my head. I, along with the twins, snapped out of sleep when a rapid knock sounded on the door, followed by Tori's frightened voice. Chapter 85. Tori sounded frantic, and if her rapid knocks were any indicator, something had happened. The twins and I were out of bed in an instant, shoving on any article of clothing we could. Perhaps there was a downside to sleeping naked. I wrenched the door open once the twins had at least put shorts on. Tori stormed in, her fiery locks an absolute mess and her eyes wild. I was still in the process of putting on my own shirt, foregoing AB.RA completely. What? I stammered, grabbing onto Tori with gentle hands. I searched her eyes for answers but found only fear and questions. What happened? Tori shook of the fear that warped her insides, much like I thought she would. She squared her shoulders, and let out a shaky breath before composing herself. I planned to go down a floor for some ice, figured it wouldn't hurt because all of the guards posted and whatnot. Tori let the words out in a rush, and gave Cade a glare when he scoffed at her. I had gotten some drinks at the store when we stopped, but they were warm. Sue me for wanting a cold drink. What happened next? I pressed, flashing Cade a look that said not now. A guard followed me down, we couldn't have been gone for more than 5 minutes. Tori continued, her nervous eyes back on me. When we came back up, the guards were gone. Every single one. The one that took me down to get ice escorted me back to my room and told me to stay there. Obviously, I didn't listen. Why would I when something this creepy was going on? I waited a minute and came back out. The guard that took me to my room was gone, as in not even on this floor. I swore I could hear something clatter out in the hall. Like someone had dropped something. That clatter was followed by a muffled bang, loud enough to grab the twins' attention. Something's wrong, don't you feel it? Tori asked, her voice lowering into a hushed whisper. I certainly do now. I nodded, locking eyes with the twins to see that they also felt the same. I walked over to the door, ready to wrench it open. Every ounce of fatigue had been wiped from me, replaced with fear and a strange sense of foreboding. Something was definitely wrong, we just hadn't noticed it in time. Just as I opened it an inch, Alex's shoulders slammed into the door. Don't open it! Alex snarled, his nose tilted upwards as he took deep breaths of the air around us. His eyes darted over to Cade, narrowing in both determination and feral anger. You smell that? Tori lifted her nose to the air as well and inhaled. I followed suit, but ended up confused. I smelled nothing other than the usual scents of a hotel. Lotion and soap in the bathroom, cleaner and laundry detergent, and just a hint of the twins' cologne from before we left the cabin. What is it? I asked, unable to pinpoint what scent they were talking about. Shit, that's not good. Whoever's here came prepared. Cade snapped, his eyes darting around the room. Short version, it's a gas designed for werewolves. Created by the High Table. It also has silver particles in it. The smell is subtle, but it's sweet and metallic. Alec grunted, looking through the peephole while Cade scanned the room for something. Small dosages cause hallucinations, large leave you completely unconscious. I took a deep breath again, peeling back the layers of various scents until I reached what they were talking about. A floral kind of sweetness, somewhat like perfume. It was to mask the horrendous metallic undertone, nearly strong enough to mimic the scent of fresh blood. What do we do? I hissed, knowing a hotel door wouldn't keep the gas from us for long. All at once, my stomach dropped. Garrett and Julian are out there, and your parents. I wasn't worried about us so much as everyone else. I trusted the twins, and I knew Tori could hold her own. Plus, I wouldn't hesitate to use my abilities if it meant getting us out of here. It was the twins' parents I worried for. Possibly even Julian and Garrett. We can't help them. Cade replied, his voice and eyes hard. If the gas touches our skin, it'll burn. Then the hallucinations will start, if we aren't knocked out from inhalation. It's everyone for themselves. Alec nodded, his eyebrows knitted tightly together. My gut clenched and instant tears sprung to my eyes as I felt the emotions of the twins. Both of them, they were so strong. They were worried, terrified actually, but kept in control to help Tori and I. We were their priority at the moment, and I knew they'd do everything possible to get us out. I took a few steadying breaths to keep myself from completely falling apart. I'd be no help if I were a sobbing, sniffling mess. I shoved the worry and agony deep down, hopefully letting survival mode take over. We don't have much time. Whoever threw that is going to come breaking down these doors. Cade said, darting over to the window. He pressed himself against the wall, brushing the curtain away with a single finger. I realized what he was doing. He was trying to see if we were surrounded, if the windows were a viable option. Good news, we were not surrounded. The side of the building we were on faced a thick forest. The parking lot was on the other side of the building, so getting to the sedan wouldn't be an option. Bad news, we were on the 4th floor. While I doubted it would kill us, we would certainly be worse for wear if we fell 40 feet. As I dreaded but somewhat expected, the windows were our only way to go. Tori, Cade, and I wrenched the windows open. They were large bay windows that overlooked the forest and very distant mountain range. It was a beautiful view, but now looked daunting and sinister in the dark. Alec had pushed one of the antique dressers in front of the door. It wouldn't do much, but any number of seconds could be precious in a situation like this. I could hear them now, the steady thud of feet hitting the floor. Alec stiffened at the peephole and I knew I was right. Whoever they were here. We need to get her out, now. Alec snarled, whipping around from the door. He made it 3 feet before a blast originating from the door threw him forwards. My ears ached from the sound. I winced as splintered wood shot out in all directions, leaving a scratch and a few splinters against my cheek. Even as abject horror flowed through me, I reacted instantly. I lunged for Alec's crumpled form. He wasn't dead, not by a long shot. Stunned and covered in a few burns and cuts, Alec stirred on the floor. Cade's arms wrapped around my waist, and an ear-splitting scream spilled from my mouth. It was agony and fury wrapped into one animalistic sound, something that wasn't quite human. Men dressed in dark clothing filled the room. In those little pocket moments when time seems to slow, I had enough time to assess what they were wearing. If I wasn't a werewolf traveling with my 2 alpha mates, I would have thought they were the SWAT team. There were no letters on their padded vests and dark helmets with face shields. I was furious that Cade would pull me away from Alec, that he wouldn't rush to help his brother. I understood a moment too late why Cade had ripped me away. When the men demolished our door, they let the wispy tendrils of gas fill the room. It was hazy, a little bit like cigarette smoke as it whooshed in the bedroom. Instead of slowly blanketing the room, it spread quickly, that perfume scent strong and pungent. The gas rushed over Alec's form, even as he pulled himself from the floor with supernatural speed. I could see it in his eyes, when the gas took hold. They seemed to glaze over just a bit. 1 second, I was staring into Alec's eyes with both fear and courage. The next, I could taste that pungent scent on my tongue. I coughed and sputtered when my throat grew tight and raw, like I had a bad case of strep throat. The gas was everywhere now, on every taste bud and nerve ending in my body. I could feel it rushing through my lungs, even with the tiny breaths I was taking. My lungs ached and head throbbed, and I knew we were running on little time. All of this happened so fast, much faster than it seems. It hadn't even been 3 minutes and everything had gone horribly wrong. As my vision blurred, Cade jumped into action. He had to be fighting the effects of the gas, but I couldn't tell from his emotions. Everything was jumbled, a mess of color and faces, odors that made my nose burn and eyes water. I'm going to try and break our fall. I heard the echo of Cade's voice by my ear. I could barely detect the pain within the voice, as the men who stormed the room began shooting. The next second, I was dropping through the air. My mouth was torn open, but I couldn't bring myself to scream. The fall stopped so abruptly that I grunted, pain dancing up my torso. This is going to hurt. Alex's voice called out seconds before we continued falling, only to hit the ground. Darkness and the deep green shade of the grass and forest flashed before my eyes. The sound was a dull thud, but every ounce of oxygen was torn from my lungs in that moment. My muscles ached hell, even my bones ached. I hadn't broken anything, at least, not that I could tell. If it weren't for my werewolf side, my body would have been one large mottled bruise. I couldn't tell the black spots dancing in my eyes from the darkness of night. My body groaned, demanding a moment to lay here in agony. Get up and run. We can't stay here. Cade snarled, and a hand wrapped around my upper arm, pulling me to my feet. My legs felt like jelly, but I managed to stay upright when Cade pulled me forward. My torso was already aching and throbbing, but I couldn't tell if it were from the fall or our run. Everything raced by me in a blur, distorted from the gas I had inhaled. It was worse than being drunk. Not only did I have poor control over my own body, but the world around me was warped, and I was pretty sure I could see something huge darting through the forest up ahead. Hallucinations were bad enough, but I also felt like I had inhaled liquid fire. My throat felt raw, and it ached to take oxygen into my lungs. Run, 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 run. The word was a song, a mantra I told myself over and over again. Until the pain was no more than a dull burn. We ran into the forest, all without looking behind us. Branches whipped against my skin, leaving little kisses of stinging pain behind. It was a feat not to trip over everything, especially as we ran. We need to shift. Tori's voice sounded from somewhere to my left. Our wolves can fight it off faster. We need to shift now, sweetheart. Cade murmured, it's going to hurt, but you need to give in to the pain. It was near impossible to call Thalias forward, and I reminded myself to ask why the gas affected her differently. She was still in my mind, in the same amount of pain as I. Cade was right, I thought as splinters of sharp pain danced up my back and shoulders. I could feel every shift of my bones, every tug and twist of my muscle as I turned human to wolf. Thalia did not have time to sit and fight the pain that encompassed her. She stood to 4 legs and darted off into the forest. I could feel myself slipping, losing consciousness as Thalia propelled us through the forest. The last thing I remember was hearing Alex's smooth voice coax me into the darkness. I woke with a start, feeling as though I had the worst hangover known to man. My head was a symphony of ragged pain, and my mouth was horribly dry. I spat out something that looked suspiciously like dirt and tried not to gag. As I looked at my surroundings, I understood why I was naked and covered in dirt. We were still deep in the forest, but the trees looked completely different here. They were larger and much shorter than the forest at the hotel. My naked body was coated in dirt, mud, and scrapes. It looked like Thalia had fell down a hill, and shifted mid-fall. My body was tangled in Cade's, and part of me was resting on his chest. We were at the bottom of a large hill, laying partially in a ravine of some sort. The water was wonderfully cold against the sweat that coated my body. Cade came to around the same time as I. I knelt by the ravine and drank deeply, wincing as my sore throat ached. "Alec!" I called out. I wasn't yelling, but I did raise my voice just a bit. It ached, speaking that loud, but it was worth the twinge of pain. "Tori! Quiet, sweetheart!" Cade hushed me, standing from the stream to take me in his arms. His hands were gentle as they pulled twigs and leaves from my tangled hair, and brushed some dirt from my face. His eyes were heavy, and one peek at his emotions had my heart shriveling in my chest. He was frightened, worried, completely frazzled and thrown off his feet. Cade was not one to feel those things. He's unwaveringly strong and horrifically stubborn. I knew where those emotions were stemming from, and my eyes darted around frantically, my heart on the verge of a panic attack. "Where are they?" I hissed, my voice raspy and broken. I had heard them with us, I know I had. They had been right beside me. I couldn't see them because of the gas, because everything had been distorted. There had to be a mistake. Their voices were real, they had to be. Neither one of us knew. We didn't know. They never made it out. Cade's voice was low but stern. He wasn't hardening himself, but letting the emotions wash over him, filling him with grim determination. His sorrow quickly turned to fury, and his fury alone chased away the tears that leaked from my eyes. We were all hit with the gas. It's likely we could have hallucinated most of what happened last night. "We'll get them back, Claire. We'll kill each and every one of them." Chapter 86. We're 5 hours from the hotel and even farther from the high table. Cade hissed under his breath, quickly shoving a handful of waters into our small cart. If it weren't for the weight of everything looming down on me, this moment would have been hilarious. We had woken up completely naked, as all werewolves do when they shift back into human form. We had trudged through the woods for an hour before finding an actual paved road with actual street signs. Hiking through the forest, completely naked, it's not something I'd do again given the option. Half an hour later, we found the only full-functioning store in this little town. Apart from the faded lettering, Mini Mart on the sign at the front of the parking lot, there was no other indicator of what this place might be. I was expecting a gas station, but was surprised to see people emerging from the store with carts full of groceries and other items. The two of us hid behind a small dumpster area, trying to ignore the stomach-curling stench of rotten fruits and spoiled meat. I wasn't sure what Cade was looking for, but gasped when he darted out from behind our hiding spot. I remained rooted in place, unable to force myself to move. Call it cowardly, but I wasn't exactly ready to streak through a parking lot in midday. I had to give it to Cade, even with his bulky frame, he was pretty stealthy. No one had seen him, all were too preoccupied within their own little bubbles. Moms fussed over their small toddlers, others were on their cell phones or transfixed within their own little worlds. Cade hid behind a minivan that was overflowing with motivational bumper stickers. The trunk was open, and a cart full of groceries sat unattended beside it. The woman had forgotten her wallet inside the store, and during her fuss, hadn't bothered closing her trunk. Cade dug through her bags quickly, snatching up two that seemed to fit his needs. He rummaged through the front of her vehicle, moving even faster than before. Part of me wanted to laugh, to cackle so loudly all attention was drawn our way. Here we were, missing a mate and brother, absolutely naked in the middle of nowhere, stealing from some poor woman's car. It was an impossible situation, one that brought laughter bubbling in my chest whenever I tried to make sense of it. "Anyone see me?" Cade murmured roughly, making me jump. I hadn't seen him darting back over towards me, hiding behind cars until he was close enough to sprint. I think that soccer mom back there saw you." I teased half-heartedly. She practically swooned, nearly lost control of her cart. "A soccer mom!" Cade snorted, a shimmer of playfulness in his eyes. I swallowed heavily when his words made my eyes drift lower. In that case, I probably did her a favor. Cade handed me a t-shirt that was nearly 5 sizes too large, but I wasn't about to complain. It was better than standing naked in broad daylight. Cade slipped on an identical shirt and a pair of loose basketball shorts. We were both barefoot and coated in mud. Hopefully they didn't refuse us at the entrance. "I feel bad about stealing from that lady," I grumbled, following behind Cade as the two of us darted to the front of the mini-mart. "I thought you'd say as much," Cade replied, his lips twitching into a little smirk. "I have her plate number, I'll make sure we pay her back." 15 minutes later, we stood within the brightly lit mini-mart. Cade looked like a bear pushing along a child's shopping cart as we putted down the aisles. The mini-mart seemed like the main store in town, the place you went when you needed just about anything. They had an entire grocery section, along with appliances, clothing, and even some little furniture pieces. Cade was currently stuffing the cart full of drinks and small snacks. As much as we wanted to run in our wolf forms, whoever had come after us would now be searching the forests. Even in human form, we had to lay low. When we realized Mini-Mart had a clothing section, we replaced what we had stolen from the lady. We needed something with a hood, something that would help us blend and lay low. Cade looked up at me through his dark lashes and snarled quietly, "Stop looking at me like that." "Like what?" I sniffed, trying to keep my eyes centered on his face. Mini-Mart didn't exactly have a wide selection of clothing, and most of it was that tourista-type crap. I snickered and giggled when Cade was left with nothing but a tie-dye sweatshirt 2 sizes too small. My giggles were replaced with quick looks of surprise and hunger. Cade found a pair of cargo shorts that fit him well enough. The sweatshirt was big enough to fit over the large muscles that graced Cade's body, but they left absolutely nothing to the imagination. I could see every indentation of his abs through the cheap thing. The sweatshirt was light in color, made from shades of blue, purple, and pink. Cade actually looked really good in those soft colors, even with the harshness of his eyes and face. "Like you want to devour me in this very store," Cade retorted, swatting at my bottom as he passed. My choice of clothing hadn't been much better, but they were severely limited in the size department. The shorts I wore were a few sizes too small, and fit more like underwear than anything else. Luckily, the black hoodie I wore was low enough to cover my bottom. Cade grumbled a bit when he realized the black hoodie wasn't in his size. I'm beginning to believe he has an aversion to color. We had been bantering back and forth since entering the mini-mart. I think we were both trying to ignore the emotions we felt from one another. We were trying to push aside that crippling panic and fear, replacing it with whatever we could. We used one another as a distraction, as an anchor. There was something neither one of us wanted to admit, something we both knew without fail. Alec wasn't dead, we would know if he were. I could feel my connection to him like a fishing wire, endless in length and stronger than anything I had ever experienced. That was not severed. The earth would shake if one of my twins left me, I was sure of it. He was very much alive, but we could only hope the same for Tori. Cade paid for our things with a 20 he stole from the stranger's van. I couldn't help but feel the more we tried to blend in, the more boldly we stood out. An elderly couple let us use their cell phone to make a call. We figured they were the least likely option when it came to potential assassins and high-table spies. I let out a shaky sigh when the twins' dad picked up the phone. Cade and I locked eyes, both of us acknowledging that relief that bolstered through us. We would feel the same when we got Alec and Tori back because we would get them back. They're both all right, Garrett and Julian too. Cade sighed, running his fingers through his hair. The action disrupted the hood on his head, making him grumble. Clearly, you were the target. They most likely took Alec and Tori when we slipped away. My throat constricted at the thought, and all of those pesky, pent-up emotions bubbled towards the surface. Blame, sharp and blunt like an old butcher's knife, raked across my skin. Don't do that, sweetheart. Cade grimaced, pulling me into his arms. He had never been one for lengthy, sweet words, but he always gave me what I needed. We would do anything for you, but I need you to be strong for Alec and Tori. Someone from the high table is behind this, and we will make them pay. I let myself be weak for a few moments, to drown in the pain that hid beneath my skin. A few seconds, that's all I would allow myself. I would be useless to Alec if I let this break me. Cade gave me those seconds, holding me tightly. I didn't cry, I couldn't when Cade was giving me the strength of his emotions. Love so gentle from such a beast of a man, it was purer than anything I had ever felt before. We'd arrive to the high table meeting by the skin of our teeth, if we were lucky. Time had already been lost fleeing from the hotel, and we had yet to leave neutral territory. I wouldn't even allow myself to think too hard on that. Cade and I had enough to worry about without factoring bounty hunters and rogues into the mix. Cade and I needed to travel to the next town over. It was almost an hour away, but Garrett had a friend there who would take us to the next hotel, 7 hours away. I wasn't anywhere near trusting Garrett to that extent, but what other choice did we have? I was willing to do just about anything to get Tori and Alec back. We took a cab to the next town over, heading to an address given by Garrett's friend. We pulled into the parking lot of this little hardware store and waited. Garrett's friend turned out to be the owner of the hardware store. Cade and I sat huddled in the back of his pickup truck for 7 hours, growing stiffer and more irritable as the sun crested and finally set. The truck smelled of tobacco, which truly wasn't an unpleasant smell. The cigars Garrett's friend smoked smelled sweet like honey and bourbon. We traveled under the radar, which made me feel both free and exposed. Blending in was our best option for the time being, but I missed the security 3 sedans full of guards provided. As Cade chatted with Garrett's friend in hushed tones, I closed my eyes and let my mind drift. I kept a firm hand around the tether that connected Alec and I, waiting for something, anything. Movement or a flutter down the bond that would let me know, that would chase away the poison pumping through my heart. I felt nothing down the bond, but I wouldn't let that discourage me. The bond was still there, still present and alive. I managed a pitiful nap filled with nightmares and whispered threats before finally giving up on the idea of sleep. Once night had completely taken over, Cade and I were squished together on a very lumpy motel mattress. The quality didn't matter, just as the cigarette-smelling blanket had no importance. This place, it was just a stepping stone, a waiting room till we were able to find Alec and Tori. We fell asleep in each other's arms that night, still wearing those cheap clothes from the mini-mart. When I slept with the twins, there was no room in my head and heart for nightmares. My soul seemed to know there was something missing. The nightmares weren't bold and vicious, but whispered on razor-sharp blades that stung my eyes and made my heart ache. That morning, we survived on stale bagels and some chips from our shopping trip yesterday. The coffee the motel offered was dark and a bit burnt, but it helped dull the fact that Cade and I both slept horrendously. Garrett, Julian, and the twins' parents arrived at the hotel the night before. A team of the twins' security patrol had turned around last night, and met us at the motel we stayed at. From the motel, we had a remaining 4 hours left to drive. Every time I glanced at the GPS, I found myself more on edge. We'd arrive with minutes to spare. That was not enough time to prepare myself, to figure out the right words to say that would buy me my life. The Crest Brook was the nicest hotel in town, and glittered like the crown jewel of the city. Shaped like a fin, it jutted from the earth as though it were breaching water. Shimmering windows were visible from the outside. There were a few statues outside the hotel, giving it a modern vibe. The moment the sedan pulled into the parking lot, our security team unleashed themselves onto us. Spewing from just about every corner of the hotel and surrounding lot, they gave Kate and I a small berth as they escorted us into the building. Kate and I were stuffed into the elevator, with 6 guards stationed around us. Like previously, we had the entire floor to ourselves. Garrett, Julian, and the twins' parents were in our suite when we arrived. My stomach twisted painfully, and I thought I might spew the gas station snacks from my stomach if I had to endure the gut-wrenching worry that the twins' parents felt. You could imagine my surprise when both their mom and dad pulled me in for a hug, telling me how glad they were that I was safe. There was no blame, no accusations. It was my fault Tori and Alec were taken, that wasn't up for argument. It was me they wanted. There will be time to catch up after this mess is sorted. The twins' mom huffed, giving me a quick peck on the cheek. Her eyes softened when she saw the surprise on my face. I'm glad you're safe, Claire. My heart was hammering as I was passed from person to person, starting with the twins' mom. She led me into one of the bedrooms, fussing over my knotted hair and sleep-filled eyes. They've postponed the meeting a few hours. The twins' mom called out. Her voice echoed throughout the bathroom, meshing with the sound of water spilling from the shower head. I was taking what might be the world's shortest shower and was out before 3 minutes had passed. They've postponed the meeting? Then why are we in such a rush? I exhaled, raising my voice as I shouted above the loud whir of the hair dryer. The twins' mom wielded it expertly, using a round brush to dry my lengthy hair into soft waves. The date of this meeting was supposed to be confidential. She replied, rolling her eyes. The information was leaked, along with what you are. There have been surges of old families arriving. There might only be 5 families within the high table, but they allow witnesses. Useless witnesses, bought off by most of the families, but there are a few honorable ones left. All of the families in attendance are gathering before the meeting. You'll both be expected to attend. This whole thing sounds rigged from the beginning, I grunted when she brushed through a particularly thick patch of knots. Perhaps you might get a lead on where Alec is, or who has taken him. She spoke quietly, her voice steel-hard and her eyes dark. A feral mother whose cub had been ripped away, she was nearly as vicious as I. We'll find him. I promised her, my voice strong and resolute. I let my own fury flash in my eyes, crazed but calculated. I would not break, not for these people. I was relieved when she changed the subject, but it was difficult to let the tension flow from my shoulders. It was awfully convenient that a vote was cast to delay the meeting. She murmured under her breath, our eyes locked through the mirror I sat in front of. Marcus Novak called it to vote, 2 other families agreed. Why? Why did they delay the meeting? I'm sure it wasn't for my sake. I laughed dryly. Zayn Novak was running late. She told me, not bothering to conceal the double meaning of her words. It seems he was stuck in traffic. Coincidences were elusive and rare, especially in this twisted world. Chapter 87. I was seeing red in an instant, unable to hear anything past the blood rushing to my ears. My ability gave me insight into the strong emotions of our wolves. They felt things just like we did, though their reactions could vary tremendously. I had never felt my own wolf's anger in this way. Perhaps I had felt it during the battle, but there was too much commotion for me to truly taste the emotion in its prime. I wasn't sure when I had stood up from my seat in front of the vanity in the room, but I was horribly hot and itchy, my skin uncomfortable and much too tight. When the towel fell from my body, it did nothing to cool me down. I could see the twins' mom back out of the room, shutting the door quickly behind her. I didn't have the time or need to care. I was too busy connecting the dots in my head, the dots that would lead Zayn Novak and his father to an early grave. Zayn had made it fairly clear his father keeps white wolves for their abilities, whether or not that arrangement was morally sound was beyond me. His father was one of the wolves who would want to use me, or destroy me, whichever would benefit him more. There were too many red flags pointing in his direction, and this was the one to top the proverbial cake. He had been late when my mate and best friend had been taken. Now that I had something to go on, my wolf was whipped into a frenzy. If we weren't in human form, foam would be frothing from our mouths. I could feel my fingernails lengthen into claws, but I was consumed by the rage burning inside of me. I gave myself over to that rage, because it felt so good to give that anger and restlessness purpose. The Luna in me seemed to come out at random moments, especially when one of my twins were in danger. It felt like seconds had passed when Cade barreled into the room, hesitating for just a moment as he noticed my very naked form, either that or he noticed my lengthened nails and teeth, I wasn't sure. He could feel my rage, that frenzy of vengeance that bubbled beneath my skin. It nearly drowns him too, trying to coax him into its blistering depths. Burnt skin and whispered promises of revenge, simply abandon reason. I think it was the initial surprise of Cade tackling me that gave me a moment's clarity to think. That moment of clarity was snuffed when Cade pressed his lips to my own and hauled me halfway up the wall. His hands formed iron-clad grips on my thighs, wrapping them around his waist. I struggled and thrashed under his grip, bloodthirsty and gunning for Zayn and Marcus Novak. I clawed tracks down his back, hardly noticing my sharpened nails had returned to normal. That inability to hurt the twins, it was instinctual. Neither Thalia or I could cause the twins actual harm, and my retracting claws proved that. Where my claws would have shredded Cade's skin, my human nails left aching welts that made him harden and his chest rumble. Give me your anger, sweetheart. Cade snarled, yanking himself back to stare into my eyes, blown out with rage. With my body in his grasp, he stepped back and shoved me back into the wall. The barely noticeable fracture of pain only served to anger me, and place my full attention on Cade. You can't go out there like this, you'll kill someone. And while I'm not entirely opposed to that, I can't let anything happen to you. Cade's words snapped through my fiery anger, like shards of frosty ice. I could hear him, and I understood what he was asking of me. He wanted my anger, every aching, blistering piece of it. I could feel it in the way he opened up to me, taking on my emotions as though they were his own. He let that fury wash over him, and began to soften and soothe the lava into rock. My attention now shifted to his clothes, and how he was wearing far too many articles for my liking. I shredded them from his body, enjoying the snarl that came from his lips when his shirt hung in tatters. Cade wrapped his fingers in my hair and yanked my head backwards, sending a shower of fireworks dancing behind my rage-tinted eyes. The moment his pants fell to the ground, he pulled me from the wall and carried me towards the bed. Cade maneuvered the two of us until we sat at the center of the bed, and I could feel every thick inch of him rocking against me. He gripped my wrists in his hands and looked up at me as I straddled him. I was sure I looked a mess, face red from rage, hair halfway done, and eyes wide and frenzied. Cade looked at me as though I were the sun that brightened his day, that led him from the dark and coldness that clung to him like a seductive shroud. Take what you need from me, sweetheart. He murmured. His eyes weren't hooded and thick with lust. They were blazing with a feral interest I hadn't seen before, as though my frenzied state had appealed to a certain side of his wolf. His words sent a ripple effect through me, loosening that knot in my heart long enough for me to breathe. It was a choked breath, one that bordered on a sob. They needed to pay, every last one of them. I wanted to scour this hotel until I found Zayn, until I demanded he give me them back. Thalia and I were being torn apart, desperate to do something, anything. I dug my nails into his chest and hissed as I sunk myself down on his length. My body struggled to stretch as fast as I moved, but I savored that raw edge of pain as I took Cade into my body. A low groan sounded in his throat as he filled me entirely, stretching me open for him to see. His breathing was heavy, and his fingers dug into my hips painfully. There was something so blissfully animalistic about it, as though we had abandoned those trivial things that made us human. We gave ourselves over to our emotions, and let them drive us into this frenzy. I let my movements quicken, not caring if they were messy or frantic. I held nothing back, whimpering and crying out as racked my body. I stiffened and arched on top of Cade, whimpering. My anger was spent, fizzled out as I took all of it out on Cade. My legs still trembled, and stars still danced behind my eyes. My eyes widened on Cade, and I yelped as he flipped me onto my back. My core was still throbbing, sending little tingles of pleasure as my thighs rubbed together. He yanked my legs over his arms and settled them, lowering himself close to my face. His eyes were blown wide and dark. His wolf was coming out to play, dominating its mate and enjoying every little scream and whimper she made. I love when you look at me like that. It's intoxicating. Cade snarled softly, lowering his mouth to the mark on my neck. I gasped and tried to arch my back when his teeth glided over the sensitive skin, but his body held me in place. I groaned low in my throat when his tongue glided up my neck, savoring my taste. I'm going to FK you until every bit of that anger is gone, sweetheart. And I won't be gentle. You're going to feel every ounce of pain. Isn't angry a good thing? I gasped, my words stalling in my throat when he playfully nipped at my neck. They pulled my attention away from my anger and sent me tumbling down. Pain sprouted where he bit, but it was an addicting pain. I don't want you angry. At least, not yet. Cade murmured against my neck. I need you determined, focused. We need to be on the same page. When we have Alec, then, you can be angry. You can take every ounce of revenge you need, and I'll be right there to help you. Until then, I need you in control. We'll be late, I stammered, thinking about the gathering before our appointment. FK the high table. Cade snarled, his voice lowering until he sounded much more animal than man. They've taken enough from me, they will not take my time with my mate. Then do it. FK me until I can control myself, because if I go out there right now, I'll tear everything apart until I find him. I replied, trembling under the anticipation that danced through me. Something snapped within Cade, and suddenly I was being battered by his emotions. He felt guilty that he only held half of our bond and couldn't do anything to remove the pain that hung over my head like a shroud. He hated the depth and depravity of his own emotions, because they only contained a fraction of my own. Cade pinned me to the bed with those strong arms and took that desperation out on my body. I came until my limbs went tight and loose, until spots danced behind my eyes and my mouth dried with thirst. Only when Cade stiffened inside of me and took my head into his hands, did I collapse onto the bed. He followed suit, remaining on top of me as we both savored the comfort of our embrace. We didn't use words to calm the storm that raged within both of us. Words could only do so much, and sometimes the situation calls for other things. Life is messy and complicated, and even werewolves seek comfort in times that are chaotic and merciless. We used those stolen moments to seek that solace in one another, but our thoughts never strayed far from our missing friends and that anger, smothered for the time being. Chapter 88. The hour after my somewhat with Kate had gone by in an instant. His mom was back 10 minutes later, fixing my hair and ignoring what had clearly gone on between me and her son. She put a light coating of makeup on my face, darkening my large eyes and making the two different colors more pronounced. The meeting before the high table meeting wasn't a formal event, it was more like business than anything else. Assessing potential enemies, seeking out weaker alphas, and generally causing havoc for most of the lower-ranked werewolves. Cade's mom helped me into a slate gray dress, zipping up the low neck back in a smooth motion. The dress reached my knees and was tight around my curves. It showed just enough cleavage to look classy, and brought out the silver tones in my one blue eye. It was best everyone viewed me as a capable adult, and not an emotional teenager. They needed to believe I wouldn't use my abilities recklessly, or for my own vengeance. I found the whole thing to be somewhat absurd. Isn't it my choice how to use the abilities I was gifted with? She left my hair down, hoping to remind everyone that while I was a cool and collected adult, I was still young and inexperienced to this world. I had to say she did an incredible job. The dress made me seem mature and responsible, but my eyes looked larger with the makeup she had put on me, brighter and more vibrant. "All right, you're ready," she huffed, settling herself down after fussing over my hair for another half an hour. Her eyes went brittle and the faint lines around her mouth deepened. "You're already late, but that doesn't matter anymore. The news about Alec, it's already spread." I thought it was being contained. I scoffed, grinding my teeth against the thrashing beast that was now held on lockdown inside of me. Thalia couldn't be trusted not to hunt Zayn Novak down and use our power on him without warrant. It was. She laughed dryly, her eyes disbelieving. Why would they want to contain anything? Now everyone believes they know how to control you. The smart ones are keeping their distance, waiting for you to snap. When you use your abilities, they'll most likely put you to death. It seems like you know a lot about the high table, I commented. We all do. She grunted. They've killed more of us than any other species. As Kate and I were escorted through the twisting and turning halls of the hotel, we were debriefed on the more important guests at today's meeting. Marcus Novak sat number 1 at the high table, holding the largest pack and influence in the country. Cunning and brutish, he believes in moves and counter-moves. Perfection is what he and his pack strive for. Second was Desmond DeVille, known for being the oldest unmated male. His reputation was one earned through hard labor and copious amounts of partners at his disposal. He doesn't run the second largest pack in the country for nothing, the man is built like a submarine. Third was Braden Cliff, probably the most studious and logical of the 5. He's less ruled by a dark need for more power than the others, and can turn the tides of any ruling. Fourth is Jasper Fox, an enigma clad in tight leather, silver piercings, and cerulean eyes that would bring any woman to her knees. It's rumored that Jasper Fox had a bad upbringing, and was sold to some rogues as a toddler. He has scars all over his body, but no one has the gall to ask what happened. Sebastian Sable is last, and is one of the slimiest of the bunch. It's rumored he works closely with Marcus Novak, though no one knows the exact details of the arrangement. Sebastian Sable is what most would classify as a sociopath. He's much like Marcus, but without the cunning and subtlety that makes for an incredible villain. The 5 alphas of the high table were in this room, mingling with the smaller alphas of the country. Their votes were used in the process of coming to a decision, though the high table had the final vote. The large events room of the luxurious hotel was the perfect business casual background for the meeting. Thick curtains hung from tall windows, and sleek black tables sat around the back half of the room. There were employees dressed in black, toting around large platters and offering flutes of bubbling champagne. "It's a lot to take in, isn't it?" Cade grunted low. Our eyes remained forward, but I hoped he could see the slight twitch to my lips. He was making this easier on me, even though he believed he couldn't. Having him by my side, it was all that kept me from going feral. "Are you kidding me?" I scoffed quietly. The only thing I remember is what she said about the high table, everything else was a blur. "You are so incredibly responsible in the face of danger, sweetheart." Cade chuckled incredulously, linking his arm in my own. We were escorted inside and were nearly bombarded with packs that wanted to talk. Most of the alphas spoke with Cade, though their eyes would often stray and linger on me for far too long. They spoke of truces and alliances, potential partnerships that might benefit both packs. Cade noticed those hungry glances, yearning for power. Those men were lucky Cade had some form of restraint. Not all were bad, though. There were two who seemed a little more than pissed an alpha would be kidnapped to aid a feud between white wolves and other werewolves. Cade didn't get along with any of them, but he's always been more abrasive than Alec. "That's Marcus Novak," Cade murmured quietly, squeezing my hand lightly. We had stopped for something to drink, and I stopped myself as the urge to guzzle the dry-tasting champagne fell over me. My mouth was horribly dry from speaking and smiling, laughing and chatting like an innocent, beautiful girl would. At Cade's words, my head whipped around. I'm sure that's not the reaction he wanted me to have, but I couldn't help it. I had heard so many bad things about this man. I expected a shaved head and thick face scars, something that identified him as an immediate villain. There was none of that. Marcus Novak was a conventionally attractive man, much like his son. Their faces were perfectly angular and chiseled. Full lips, strong nose and cheekbones, and full eyebrows and lashes. Very muscular but not overly bulky, and he even had a charming smile. I felt a bit robbed that someone so supposedly evil looked so normal. You think I'd be used to monsters having human faces, but I don't think I am. You're disappointed? Cade questioned, his head tilting to the side and his eyes burning with curiosity. That emotion doesn't make sense in this situation, Claire. I tried not to laugh at the confusion on his face, or the way his hair shifted from the movement and fell over his forehead. He looks normal. I elaborated with a frown, so yeah, I'm disappointed. I expected this big bad alpha, but he doesn't look like a bad guy. Of course he doesn't look like one. Cade grunted, Marcus Novak is all charm and smiles. He lies so well that I think he truly believes them, eventually. So, how do we beat a liar? I mused, tapping my chin with a freshly painted fingernail. They were the only thing I had a choice on. The twins' mom wanted to paint them white. For purity and protection I scrapped that idea. I picked ruby red, the color of fresh blood. It was foreshadowing, you see. I knew that sooner or later I'd have the blood of Alec and Tori's kidnappers on my hands, and I welcomed my fate. We lie better. Cade replied, an eyebrow moved in Marcus Novak's direction. Zayn Novak chose that moment to make his appearance, swooping into the room and heading straight for his father. I could feel my heartbeat halt when I locked eyes with Zayn Novak. I felt no guilt pouring from him, nothing that would indicate he had a hand in taking my mate and friend, but I knew what the twins' mom had said. He could have simply felt justified in what he had done. That would explain the lack of guilt. What he did feel was pissed, thoroughly irritated and even a little bit hurt. I wanted to laugh, someone had hurt his feelings and wounded his ego. Cade was the rock that got me through the storm, and effectively, kept me from ripping Zayn's strangely symmetrical face off. We made it through the entirety of the gathering without an issue. The entire debacle was easily 3 hours long. What I found most entertaining, I hadn't spoken to a single member of the high table. Don't get me wrong, they all saw me, but none stepped forward to speak. Marcus Novak gave me a subtle nod, and a twitch of his lips. Desmond Deville winked at me and laughed at Cade's snarl. Braden Cliff made no indication that he had noticed me, but I could feel his assessing eyes on me more than any of the others. I had taken one look into Jasper Fox's eyes and knew that man had seen bloodshed and darkness. It was written into every puckered scar on his body. Sebastian Sable gave me an oily smile, one that promised many dark things to come. We had just a brief break to prepare ourselves for the high table meeting, not nearly long enough to settle the swarm of poisonous wasps in my stomach. Cade and I, along with our baton of guards, headed back to the room for dinner. We hadn't eaten at the gathering, for fear of being poisoned. Apparently, it had actually happened before. As we slipped into the dark hotel room, I smelled something that made me stiffen. Cade whipped around with a snarl, turning on the light in the room within seconds. My eyes ached just a hint as they adjusted, but the feeling was smothered by overwhelming relief and just a bit of fear. Sitting on the edge of the bed, unharmed and blushing furiously, was Tori. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.